If you're the parent of a baseball player who loses velocity late in games, struggles with arm pain, or just doesn't look like himself on the mound, you're really not alone. And more importantly, it's not just that they're tired, they're likely breaking down. I'm Dominic Rangel, and I'm a physical therapist and a baseball rehab specialist. And today, I want to help you understand what's happening when your son starts to fade late in the games. And more importantly, what we can do to keep him strong, confident, and healthy on the field. Welcome back to the Mound Ready podcast, the show where baseball players, parents, and coaches learn how to protect their arms, build real strength, and get back to dominating on the field. I'm your host, Dr. Dominic Rangel. Let's jump into today's episode and get you one step closer to being mound ready. So, just a few little tidbits. If you're watching on YouTube, then make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that way you can follow along as I keep giving more and more info. And then if you're listening on our podcast, make sure that you follow us so that way you can also keep on keeping up with everything that we're putting out. We're really going to take a small little shift here and focus more on the parents of the baseball players, but it's also going to be jam-packed with a lot of information as far as the things that we're looking for and the things that you as a player can also be looking for. So the first thing that we want to talk about today is how fatigue changes mechanics. So really, most people think fatigue just means that they're tired, but in baseball, fatigue is absolutely visible and it shows up in the mechanics long before it becomes any type of pain. It starts in the legs, and then as the legs fatigue, stride length shortens, lead leg brace weakens, trunk rotates early, and the arm ends up doing all the work, right? So think of it like if my legs get tired, then all of a sudden I'm going to shorten my stride because I can't push as well with my legs. My lead leg is going to get fatigued, so I can't block as well. So since I can't generate that force from my legs, the biggest thing that I can do is I can try to over rotate and increase the speed of my rotation, which in turn is going to cause all kinds of changes up the kinetic chain. And it's not just that the arm is tired, it's being forced to do more at worse positions. Like it's going to lag behind and the arm's going to drag. And whenever the arm drags, that's an end range position that your muscles are not really good at stabilizing. And at that point, there's two critical points in the throwing pattern. And that layback position where your arm's way back, that's the number one first critical point. And that's where a lot of injuries are occurring. This is going to lead us into part two, where there's mechanical red flags of fatigue. So what are the things that you're looking for? So these are the things that I tell people to look for when the parents are asking why their kid isn't really finishing the game strong, or he just doesn't look like he normally does, or at the end of the game, it really doesn't look the same as whenever he started the game. So what we're going to look for is first and foremost, a shortened stride, right? You're going to look for lead leg instability. So is that lead leg really shifting in and out, or is it really blocking like you normally see whenever they are pitching? Then you're going to look for early trunk rotation. Is the trunk really moving on par with the hips? Like, is the hip rotating and then the trunk is following? Or are they starting to do this thing where they're both rotating at the same time? If they're rotating at the same time, then you know that the legs are getting tired because they're trying to throw their body in a rotational pattern. And that is leading to that early onset of rotation, like I was talking about. And then the last thing that you're going to want to look for is lack of trunk deceleration. So for lack of trunk deceleration, you're going to be looking for things like their belt buckle is not staying towards home plate. Actually, their belt buckle, what's happening is it's over rotating and they're falling towards first base if they're a righty, or they're falling towards third base if they're a lefty. If you start to see them start to trunk shift a little bit more and they're ending a little bit more towards that base, then you know that they're having trouble slowing their body down and something is going haywire along the chain. All of these signs are going to tell me that the body is running out of gas. And when the body is out of gas, the arm's got to pay the price. And that's kind of what's going to lead us into the next thing. It's like, what is actually going on when you're seeing these things occurring? Well, every pitch generates torque and rotational force. 1 mile per hour harder an increase in velocity adds about 1 Newton meter of extra stress. Now, I know that 1 Newton meter of stress doesn't sound like a lot in isolation. Well, multiply that by each inning that they throw. How many pitches per inning? How many games have they played? How many weekends have they played in a row? And all of a sudden, that starts to stack up really, really fast. If your son or daughter isn't built to absorb and transfer that force, it's not a matter of like if they'll feel it. It's a matter of when are they going to feel it. Something will eventually break down, and we have to make sure that we're catching those things before they become an issue, not just being reactive, but at that point being proactive. So that begs the question, like, how do you protect them? Well, here are the top ways that we reduce risk in general. One, we got to build eccentric strength in your rotator cuff, in your upper body, because as the legs are transferring force up to the trunk, it gets transferred up to the arm. And the arm is basically a catapult. And all you want to do is you want to slow down that catapult as well as possible. You're not really throwing with your arms, you're throwing with your legs. So you got to train fatigue resistance in addition to eccentric training, not just power, but power under fatigue. So going with things like plate pinch holds to complete failure, or maybe doing things like prone ball drops with a heavy, like 2 pound ball, and you go until you can't do it anymore. Like that's one of the tests that we're actually going to use to determine whether or not somebody's ready to come back to the sport. And you got to have a smart workload of planning. You can't go max effort every day. That's just going to lead to a ton of breakdown. And that is not what we want. The goal is to continue to improve over time while taking small little deloads along the process, because that is what's ultimately going to allow this athlete to continue to get better for the long haul, and not just focusing on this small little short span of like, oh, we have one summer to get them to 90 miles per hour. It's like they're going to gain small amounts over time. The last thing you want to focus on is strengthening the full kinetic chain and not just the arm. So we got to focus on the legs too. Remember, the power is produced in the legs. So working on leg strength. For your trail leg, we're focusing a lot on glute and hamstring, a lot of that hinge pattern. If you haven't heard about a hinge pattern, that'll be coming up here pretty soon on this podcast. But also, you got to make sure that that lead leg, the quads on the lead leg, I will say it till I'm blue in the face. The quads have to absorb all the force from your body heading forward towards home. And what they have to do is they have to push back. So you're pushing forward with your trail leg, you're catching your weight on your lead leg, and you're pushing yourself back by blocking it with the quads. And so not only are the quads working eccentrically as they start to load as you're going towards home plate, but they're also going to work concentrically as you push back towards your trail leg. And that is what ultimately transfers the force to your core and up into your arm. We're basically training the body how to protect the arm. And that is how we reduce the breakdown. If you're watching your son struggle to stay consistent for the long haul throughout the game, or you really want to help them avoid an injury before it starts, or you're just starting to see little things that are breaking down and you're not too sure what's happening, go ahead and reach out. I'll help you figure out if it's a breakdown happening and how to start to fix it. That is how we get them mound ready.